Recently, I've been getting excited for metal sculptures as I continue learning animal art, and I wanted to try two metal options that don't require a foundry: imitation metal using mica powder and cold casting real bronze. Picking up where I left off previously, I'm trying these techniques on some recently molded low relief sculptures I made of horses and a cute cow. Since both of these methods use casting techniques, I begin this project much like my previous resin casting videos by spraying mold release and then mixing my resin. I did a quick session with white smooth cast to check that my molds were indeed good, and then I moved on to the first technique. This is the imitation technique, so there is no real metal used at all right now. The metal effect comes from the use of mica powder. There are a few different ways to use mica, and this time I'm dusting my molds, which then I'll fill with black resin, this time onyx slow resin. Other times I've mixed more mica into white resin, which does create a deeper color than just dusting, so I'm really curious to compare the results and see what black resin does. I know I'm done with this step when I have all the excess mica removed and just a sheer application stuck to the molds. Ooh, that's so shiny. Much like the silicone I used to make the molds, this resin is also a two-part formula I mixed in equal parts. The batch I'm using has a working time of about 5 minutes, which means I have 5 minutes to mix and pour into the mold before the resin starts to set. Stirring and pouring carefully all helps reduce bubbles, and a pressure pot helps shrink those bubbles so small you'll never see them without a microscope. Watching resin set is kind of magical, by the way. The only unfortunate thing about letting resin cure on my desk is I always get a lot of new bubbles in the cast, which is why I use the pressure pot. I've mentioned it briefly before and I'll mention it again. I always read safety manuals first and follow the proper steps to operate things like this. About 90 minutes later, it's time to release the cast from their chamber of darkness and see if all my hard work was worth it. We're just going to ignore the resin pulled over. Besides, that's an easy fix. And look at that shine. They have the glimmer of a very polished sculpture. And look how different the exact same colors of mica look on black resin versus on white resin. This is the exact same shade of copper, yet it's brighter and redder on the white resin. So cool. By the way, if you're enjoying this, I share animal art projects like this once a month in all sorts of media, from sculpture to painting and more. I'd love to take you with me on my art journey if you'd like to subscribe. Unlike the mica cast, the next technique I'm using actually uses real metal, and I've chosen bronze. Most of the bronze sculptures I've seen in public installations or art galleries are made with the lost wax hot casting method, which requires the use of a foundry and highly specialized skills and equipment. Cold casting is a much more accessible option to me that gives me a metal copy of my sculptures without fire. Just like with mica, there are different ways to do this, and I chose to dust my molds with this finely shaped bronze powder, and I also mix it into the black resin. This will give me copies that have metal all throughout, and because they are real bronze, they'll tarnish with age. I can even use some of the same patina effects to force aging sooner, or if I don't want any aging, I can seal them with a lacquer spray after they've cured. They all go into the pressure pot to shrink those bubbles, and 90 minutes later, here they are. Oh gosh, these pull too. Let's pull them out and see how they look though. Eee, that's so cool. This is a lot heavier than the mica version, and it feels like I have a metal coin in my hand. Let's check the next ones. Luckily, the powder had slowed down the curing time, so these casts were still a little soft, and I was able to separate them and remove the excess before they fully hardened. Using fine steel wool, a sanding pad, and ultrafine sandpaper, I gently buff the high areas to give a bit of polish and glimmer. It's important that I use gentle abrasives and buff lightly, as I only want to buff the metal and I don't want to sand away the resin and reduce detail. For the round portrait of Ray, I'm buffing a little more along the edges to give the feeling of a worn old coin. Unless these are sealed with lacquer or wax, they will tarnish with age, forming an interesting patina. There are different ways to force that patina sooner and create an interesting depth or create a faux patina. I tried two methods of using wax and salt and vinegar. I start with the mid-tan colored wax, which dried to a nice rusty color, though I feel it looks a little too grainy, so I rub most of it off. That leaves behind a very subtle reddish hue, which I kind of like. Then I mix equal parts of salt and vinegar, brush that on, and then let them sit in a sealed container for 30 minutes. They darken very slightly. Rinsing them with water stops the reaction and fixes the look. The final steps for the bronze cast is a tiny bit of the patina colored wax and some light polishing to create shine on raised surfaces. I think for my first time with patina effects, I'm fairly happy with these, and I love how different each are. Speaking of patinas, the super shiny mica powder cast will look a lot more convincing with paint to help deepen the color and give a sense of tarnish and wear. I'm using acrylic washes of earthy brown colors, applying the darker colors to the recesses or shallow areas of the sculptures first. Before it dries, I wipe away the high surface areas to get back some of that glimmer. And that mimics the polishing you saw me do on the real bronze. Already these are looking more convincing, and I continue to add different layers of brown and dark brown washes to make each one unique. For a more corroded look, I mix up teal, aqua, and light blue colors in fluid acrylic to get an even older look, especially on the faux copper. I think my painting technique could use a little more work to really be convincing, but I think it's pretty good for my first time. Compared to how they started right out of the mold, they are more convincing. Enough to stand next to the real metal casts? Let's see. Time for the showdown. I really love both, but something about the real bronze, the fact that it can tarnish with age, and the hefty weight of it makes me excited to see what animals I could sculpt with all of that in mind. I really want to try this technique on a three-dimensional sculpture next. Which one do you like better? Let me know in the comments, and also thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this, you might want to check out this next. Bye!